Something new is emerging. While people have talked about global peace, the end of history, and the disappearance of ideologies, an army of scientists around the world has continued working in their laboratories. The impact of this work is now slowly surfacing. Technology is about to take over the torch of history and will guide us to a new era. The disparate activities of scientists in the fields of genetics, robotics, artificial intelligence, bionics, and nanotechnology seem to be converging towards one goal: to transcend human limits. It will lead us inexorably towards a transhuman age, an age when more evolved species will leave mankind behind as a fossil in history.
We are shifting to a transhuman base. We've come out of a humanist time, and now we're redefining what it is to be human.
Whether we like it or not, we're becoming cyborgs. We're becoming transhumans.
We have the opportunity now to try to do things better than nature has done.
Why not have a stronger arm than we have? Why not be able to run faster? Why not be able to have tougher skins?
If you're going to replace your eye for vision, why limit it to visual? Why not give it the kind of vision a bat has? Give it ultrasound.
Could you imagine a Versace body design? Can you imagine a Terry Mugler body design? These individuals, the late Versace was an incredible designer. What if he was a transhuman? What if he was an artist who really wanted to combine art and science? I bet his designs for a future body would be astounding.
We really, really do want to violate human limits now, and we're getting closer and closer to the ability to do it. It's what we want.
You're tuned in to the Out in Front podcast. I'm your host. Call me whatever. I'm just a man. In this episode, we will be looking at some of the impacts of the Global Brain Project that happened about 10 years ago. And we will look at some of the technologies that came out of that. Things like Neuralink, things like Black Rock Synchron, which is another brain implant device. The way that AI is able to look at fMRI data and to decode our brain waves and actually draw pictures of things that we are seeing and things that we're thinking to actually write the text out. I want to take you back in time to look at video footage of when these breakthroughs happen, and you will see in this episode real footage from real universities, from the real scientists who have performed these first ever breakthroughs in our brain, as far as it comes to mapping our brain, as far as it comes to studying our brain waves and monitoring our brain waves. And before we get into deep dives into further advances in other episodes where we trend to where this leads to the mark of the beast, I'm showing you this footage here specifically because the technologists that rule the world, the technologists that create these things, I call them the idol makers of our day. They go out to a place called Black Rock City. It's a makeshift city that they set up for 7 days. They collaborate on technologies. They pray, they chant, they have all of these things going on, and at the end of it, they burn this giant effigy. These people are futurists, transhumanists who seek to upgrade our humanity, and they work with the global leaders, and they have a plan to connect you and I with artificial intelligence. So stay tuned, check it out, and we'll see you on the other side.
Dr. Robert White is a neurosurgeon at the Cleveland Medical Hospital in Ohio.
Now, here are some pictures.
In 1963, he performed the first experiment to keep a brain alive outside the body.
There have been many attempts throughout the world, particularly in the old Soviet Union, to take the brain out of an animal, they like the dog, for example, and keep it alive with machinery. Now, you can do that with the heart, the kidney, the liver, the lung, all the other body organs, solid organs. But nobody had ever been able to do it with the brain. And part of the reason is we must remember the brain is very delicate when it comes to its blood supply. And so when we finally did it and found that this brain of a highly developed animal had brain waves, had biochemistry, was functioning just as it would. Now, we couldn't talk to it. We could send it electrical signals, We could show that it could actually hear and so forth, but we didn't know whether it was processing the information. But the point of it all is that that moment in time also said to us, if you can do it for the animal brain, you could do it for the human brain.
To prove that the brain was in fact functioning normally while in this state, Dr. White needed to undertake a second experiment, during which he succeeded in transplanting the head of a monkey onto the body of another. The creature survived for 7 days before the body rejected the head.
In the monkey experiments, these animals are as much a monkey as they were when they were in their own original body. So I would presume, and I'd go beyond that, I would be assured that the monkey personality is retained. So consciousness can be transplanted. Obviously, personality, if you want to speak of the monkey having personality, can be transferred. And so you might ask, where did this bring us as far as the human spirit or soul goes? And I guess you could argue it can be transplanted.
Till now, we've been reshaping the world around us, and we can see how dramatically it's been changing. I mean, we've really reshaped the landscape, and we've built a society and altered society and changed everything that's external to us. But somehow we imagined that we were going to remain the same, that we ourselves were not going to be caught up in this process. And that's not, in fact, true. We are going to remake ourselves, and it's very difficult to deal with because it will rip free all of the anchors that have until now told us who we are as human beings.
The ability to tamper with our genes has obvious applications. We can change DNA to prevent or cure hereditary diseases. We can alter the DNA of donor organs that are to be used for transplants so that the body of the recipient won't reject them. The organ doesn't even need to come from a human being. It could perfectly well be that of an animal.
Pigs would be a good supply of kidneys or other organs to transplant in humans. But because of the difference between the two species, the pig kidney or the pig liver will be rejected by the human. So if we can humanize the pig kidney by putting in some human DNA, which will make the cells look a little bit more human, so that they are not rejected by the person immediately, then there's a better chance that you'll have a take. And this is tried to humanize animal tissues, and it's becoming a big industry because we need more organs.
I think increasingly we're going to start realizing that this body is not sacred. The way we are is not some kind of God-given plan. It's really a pure random accident. We take two sets of genes and we shuffle them and something comes out. Sometimes it's a wonderful product, sometimes it has a hole in the heart, sometimes it has psychosis or tendencies towards extreme anger, has addictive problems, can't concentrate, all kinds of defects. To say, oh, that's normal, that's sacred, that's good, to me is rather absurd. It's random. There's not a plan there that we're thwarting. So genetic engineering seems to me one of the most moral things we can do.
Not to try and hold back genetic engineering, but to try and use it in a way that best serves us. If our children can be more intelligent and healthier and live longer lives through altering our genetics, why would we not want to do it? I mean, imagine if other children could live for 2 centuries, and if you could only live for 80 years because your parents believed that it was improper to tamper with human genetics. You would not be pleased with that decision. The same thing if your IQ were a normal IQ and all of your classmates were much, much brighter because there had been sort of some biological or genetic manipulation that was possible. You'd feel very angry about this.
Once we know exactly how our DNA code functions, we will be able to enhance our bodies. Human life will improve from one generation to the next as we control and accelerate natural evolution. But a rival to mankind is appearing on the horizon, a rival that is evolving much faster. To become cyborgs able to compete with the rapid evolution of computers, we first have to understand how our own brains function. The research in this area has boomed in recent years. One of the factors behind this is the development in scanning techniques. They are now at the level that enables us to observe individual nerve cells at work in living animals.
So is this dying out here? Or is that
it's in the process of growing in.
The technique is based on fluorescent jellyfish. Dr. Lichtman isolated the gene responsible for the fluorescence. He implanted it in mice and continued his experiments until he had a mouse of which only the brain cells were fluorescent.
They're genetically engineered so that these are now heritable strains of mice. We have a yellow mouse strain, we have a blue mouse strain, we have a mouse strain where only a few cells are labeled, and we're now generating mice that have multiple colors in them. We call them rainbow mice.
With this technique, we can see individual nerve cells make connections with each other and emit signals.
It's really quite jaw-dropping. It's beautiful when you look inside and see these nerve cells that have always been there, but never easy to see before in living animals.
This technique is used now by many laboratories, helping in their efforts to understand how the brain functions. Other scientists use a completely different approach. They take the brain cells apart and let them grow in a small dish on top of a computer chip. The problem with this technique is that it is extremely difficult to place each cell exactly on the right connection point. A team of researchers at IMEC has recently found the trick. They printed a pattern on the chip with a product that the brain cells love to eat. While consuming the product, the cells get stuck to the right spot and their tentacles are guided by the pattern. This way, the whole network of brain cells can be entirely controlled. Some scientists have already been experimenting with such brain dishes. Their chips were less precise, but their results sometimes remarkable.
Let me disconnect the light show.
Dr. DeMars, for instance, tries to communicate with his brain dishes and teach them several tasks.
So each of these dishes contains about 20,000 or so neurons, which are firing away as we speak. So each one's an individual network, and they'll fire spontaneously. We take living rat neurons, and they will rapidly form a neural network. And we have this grid of electrodes underneath the surface of these living neurons, and we can listen to the conversation among the neurons. And we can also stimulate activity within that network. We can send in different patterns of stimulation and look at how the network changes as a result of those stimulations. And that's how we do what we do.
What he does is to teach his brain dishes how to control an airplane.
The network can essentially fly the aircraft in a pretty optimal way. So it won't overcorrect too much, and it'll be able to stabilize it in a wide variety of conditions. I think I've programmed like a 50-knot crosswind into this one. It was what it looks like. You can see it, the aircraft, when it hits one of these crosswinds, how it begins to oscillate. The oldest dish that I've had is at 2 years. And the only reason why that dish died was because we were moving the lab from Caltech to Georgia Tech. Otherwise, that dish would probably still be alive today. Each dish has a characteristic, so you can learn to recognize one dish from another dish. They're demanding, though. You have to feed them once a week.
More and more, we will be able to measure and understand how our brain cells function. Deciphering our consciousness is another question. But the experiments of Dr. Yang Dan have proved that in principle, it is possible to read and to understand the brain.
I didn't know that we started this thing again. So this is a digitized movie. We present this to the animal, and we record the activity of their visual neurons. And these electrical signals that we recorded from will travel through these cables.
She managed to tap the vision from the brain of a cat and to reconstruct what the cat sees onto a computer screen.
So this is a digitized movie. This particular movie is a short clip from Indiana Jones, I think.
Here we see the two images next to each other. On the left, the image that was shown to the cat. At the right, the image that is tapped out of the cat's brain.
The picture has a lot of random flickering, the noise. That's probably the noise of the actual neurons, because they sometimes fire spontaneous spikes. We consider those noise, but maybe they reflect something else, maybe the thoughts or something. But we can't distinguish that. So when we use all of those, thinking that they represent visual information, this is the reconstruction that we come up with.
It is the first time an image was tapped from a brain. It proves that we can read and understand the grammar of it. The face is recognizable, but I still can't avoid the impression that the face has something cat-like. Dr. Theodore Berger is head of the Center for Neuroengineering at the University of Southern California. With a team of top scientists from different disciplines such as neurology and computer programming, they have collaborated to develop a chip that can replace parts of the brain, or, on a longer time frame, add more brain power.
One of the first things that we do in this process is to actually study this part of the brain experimentally. We need to know very precisely how it behaves if we're going to reproduce that function in a computer chip and put it back into the brain. So what we do is to take the brains out of the animals that we use for these experiments and then slice up this brain tissue and keep the slices alive in a dish. And we studied the electrical properties of these neurons. Neurons happen to use electrical impulses to communicate with each other the same way that transistors do in a circuit. And so essentially what we do is to test the cells to find out, when we give them computer-generated signals of all possible signals, we give them random signals and we ask, how do they behave? And by looking at the translation, we figure out what the function is, and we can describe that function with a set of mathematical equations.
This portion is simulate one neuron.
My colleagues have taken that mathematical model and built a microchip circuit, very small, millimeter by a millimeter. So we can take a part of the hippocampus that's a circuit, we can cut out parts of it, throw it away, and we replace it with the microchip. And so now the whole circuit works just like the biological circuit, so that incoming information looks like, incoming temporal patterns look like outgoing temporal patterns, just like it does for the biological piece of tissue. But now there's a microchip in there, instead of having biology in there.
The chip is presently being tested on animals. One problem that remains is how to connect the chip to the brain. Today's technology uses tiny electrodes, but in the future, another option might be to put some brain cells directly onto the connection points of the chip. They would then be guided to form connections at exact points within the brain in order to establish the perfect interface.
Ça pourra permettre de réparer des cerveaux endommagés à la suite d'accidents, de blessures, n'importe quoi, de maladies. Mais d'un autre côté, ça permettra aussi de faire une communication peut-être directe de cerveau à cerveau. Des choses qui sont effectivement pour l'instant limitées, la communication intra-humaine étant limitée avec la parole, alors que là, l'idée qu'on peut directement peut-être communiquer des expériences globales de cerveau à cerveau, c'est quand même quelque chose de fabuleux qu'on peut rêver. Et puis bon, il y a des tas d'autres applications peut-être plus pratiques à court terme.
One such concrete application has already been realized. The chip is used to recognize sounds, since it can literally do that with the same accuracy as we do.
So we've used these brain-based models as to develop acoustic recognizers. So we train them in the same way that your brain learns to recognize a particular sound. And one of the first sounds that we've developed is one for gunshot recognition. It's a model of how hippocampal neurons communicate with one another. That's all it is, biology.
Science is advancing at a rapid rate, and the more we learn about genetics, and the more we learn about AI, and the more we learn about the brain, we get closer to this convergence, this symbiosis of man and machine that they're looking for. We've seen evidence of them doing head transplants, taking the brain or the entire head of a monkey and putting it onto another monkey's body and having it live for 7 days. And that was done decades upon decades ago, before we had advanced AI. people mixing genetics and growing human organs on the bodies of animals for the purpose of harvesting those organs for our usage and our benefit. We have examples of them tapping the vision from a cat. We now know that after multiple decades since that's happened, we can do this with humans, and we'll be showing some of that in the upcoming episodes. They didn't have the advanced level AI that we do today. They were working off the heels of the genome projects that were taking place with some of the things that you are seeing right now. Like in this case, the scientists that were using the neurons from a rat and attaching those neurons from a rat to a microchip, like what we see with Thomas DeMars here, and training these neurons, these circuits full of neurons. These are just rat neurons, but training them to fly aircraft and things of that nature. All of this was done before we had the breakthrough of the transformer architecture in AI. And that transformer architecture that came around 2016, 2017 was groundbreaking. When you think about the fact that we now have a piece of silicon sand that we have trained to think, it is remarkable how fast science has gone and has come. This will have some beautiful pieces to it. Technology is just that. It's a gift from God for us to be able to tap into those abilities and for us to use it for good. But unfortunately, as you will see in the episodes coming up, and as you've learned in this episode here, mankind is seeking to use this technology for evil. There is a plan for these guys to merge us with machines, and they want this done by 2030. This is the Out in Front podcast, and we will have more coming up later.